Hello, welcome, please come in. We continue our no magic journey this week in Final Fantasy VII. Magic was definitely weaker in this game than in other Final Fantasies, so I'm really curious how not being able to use the magic or summon command will compare. Being able to just use regular attacks, and probably most importantly, limit breaks, is going to be a big deal. First up is the first reactor and the first boss, which is a big nothing fight. Just spam attacks until it dies. This fight is already very magic optional when all you have is damaging spells anyway. Then run from some soldiers and hop on a train, back to Sector 7 and get my next mission to blow up another reactor. But first, it's time to do some shopping. Thankfully, I don't have to buy any expensive materia, but I do buy some better armor and some grenades. Until I get better command materia, which is going to be a while, consumable items are going to be absolutely essential. We get found out on this train, jump off, and navigate these very convenient tunnels that take me directly to my next destination. Nothing interesting here, it's already time for the next boss fight against the Airbuster. The party is split up. My regular attacks don't deal great damage, but grenades aren't actually too bad. And while I get a bit delayed in healing Tifa and she does go down, the biggest boon for this run may actually be limit breaks, because they deal way more damage than any of the other options I have. And unless I'm mistaken, that will remain true for most of the game. But that's Airbuster down and Aerith recruited. Then a brief section with a barrel puzzle and I can move on. Over at Aerith's house, I pick up my first usable materia, cover, which isn't actually that useful, but it's finally not nothing. Sketchy Town time, where I can buy both potions and high potions, which heal 100 and 500 respectively. That's not too terrible, but 500 is not going to be a lot by the mid-game. Cross-dressing time, and then into the sewers to face the next boss, Raps. And it starts out great by immediately getting paralyzed with Cross Slash. Unfortunately, Raps can inflict sadness with Lick, which, yeah, I'd be sad too if that thing licked me. Grenades are still dealing nice damage though, over 100 while my basic attacks are stuck at 45. Nice. Then pick up Steel on the way out of the sewers, which I assume they included in the game as a joke, because there are so few useful steals in this game they probably should have just skipped it. The train graveyard itself isn't very interesting, but it does have some free healing items lying around, which is always useful. Back in Sector 7, the Turks are trying to bring down the pillar, which means it's time to buy some more potions and grenades. Climb up and deliver a sternly worded message to the next boss, Reno. Reno loves to encase allies in pyramids that I then have to break by physical attacks. Fortunately, they do break in one hit, and while my regular attacks are still only dealing 45 damage, the grenades I bought are dealing about 140. I don't know that I've ever used a grenade in this game in my entire life, but turns out they're pretty useful, at least this early in the game. Swing away from absolute destruction and pick up a sense materia. This is just scan, but as a command, and while I do equip it, I don't actually really use scan ever, so that's 2 command materia, both of which are of dubious utility. Get some backstory on Aerith and it's time to climb up to the surface. I'm not taking the stairs, instead it's time to bust through the front door and take the elevator. It means more fights, but I don't have to worry about resources, and regular attacks are more than strong enough to get me through this sequence. Then a stealth section that I'm so bad at the game just gives up on me and lets me pass. I'm just so impatient. Solve the mayor puzzle to get the elemental materia. This could be useful to help withstand elemental attacks or deal elemental damage. It's a shame I basically never use it. Then climb through these vents to get, frankly, garbage. I guess I can max out the all materia for a nice payday way later in the game. Then watch a conference from the air ducts. Why is this conference room so big? There's only like 5 executives at this company. And then it's time to confront Hojo and save Aerith, which means recruiting Red and fighting another boss. This boss has a bunch of ads that I can't really effectively kill, and poison, which I don't have any way of curing at the moment. But thankfully my damage is pretty good, especially with how strong limit breaks are. Seriously, they may have overtuned these a bit. And with that boss dead, I can pick up my first actually useful command materia, Enemy Skill. I can't get any enemy skills until after the Midgar section, but I will be making good use of them. Party is imprisoned, then escapes, then head to the roof, then just leave the roof again, but leave Cloud behind. Time for an elevator fight. Barret is the only one that can hit the boss with attacks, so Red and Aerith spend a decent chunk of the time throwing grenades. And healing, because potions aren't great. Once the fight gets to phase 2, it can inflict sleep, which is not ideal. Fortunately, Aerith is actually very useful, because her limit break heals the entire party, and becomes available honestly more often than it probably should. And Red's limit can actually hit across this gap, and it ends the fight. Back to Cloud to fight Rufus. I equip Elemental and Poison on this weapon, which that doesn't even work that way. I'd need added effect to inflict poison on these bosses. Fortunately, Cross Slash is very strong and can take out the wolf. Then it's just a slow slog through the rest of the fight, and that is Rufus down. Time to ride out of here on a motorcycle, the coolness of which is slightly undercut by the fact that this minigame sucks. Seriously, the controls, the bad movement. I'm going to tentatively call this my least favorite minigame in the entire game. Then a boss. I equip Fire and Elemental and Armor to reduce the fire damage from the boss, but, ooh, that's a lot of damage it's dealing. Now, while my limit breaks are dealing good damage, I didn't think to bring Aerith so I could prioritize damage output, and that ultimately proves my undoing. I'm out of healing, and just couldn't deal enough damage. Okay, let's run it back. And first is over to this shop that is still open so I can buy some healing items so I have a bit more healing available to me. And this time I'll also put Aerith in the party instead of Red. Aerith won't be able to help out at all with offense, but her limit break will let me heal the entire party. And then once more through this awful minigame, and into the fight. My damage is obviously lower without Red, but given how much damage this boss deals, having Aerith focus on using potions is probably more effective anyway. Then I just prioritize little healing and basic attacks with some extra limit breaks. The fight certainly isn't fast, because my damage is so bad, but the extra healing items I bought, and Aerith's very strong healing, do enough to keep the party alive throughout the fight. You know, the one thing I hadn't really remembered about FF7 is how weak physical attacks are. For some reason I thought they were stronger. Anyway, now that I've left Midgard, I can get my first enemy skill, Matra Magic, which deals decent damage to all enemies. Nice. Definitely keeping that on Cloud, as he has the highest magical damage in the party other than Aerith, but his physical attacks actually deal decent damage. Then time for the Nibelheim flashback, which has nothing interesting in them. Now I can technically get Beta from the Midgardsolemn, but to be frank, getting that at this level is not really feasible. I mean, it is, and I have before, but it would probably take more time than just not doing that. So I ride a chocobo across the marsh and into the Mithril Mines. Here I can pick up the Flamethrower skill, which is honestly not super useful, but I'm already here, so I may as well grab it. Then over to Fort Condor, where I can agree to help them to get access to the free inn. I won't actually help them though, because that is expensive. But all this not fighting has gotten me a bit underleveled, so it's time for some grinding. Might as well also recruit Yuffie. I'm using Cloud in my main party because I have to, and his stats are great anyway. Barrett is in because he has high HP, defense, HP, and strength. And I think Yuffie is actually going to be my third party member because of her high dexterity and luck. Also, her weapons can hit at range, meaning back row defenses, and I don't have to worry about flying enemies. And it's time to head over to Junon to fight the next boss. This boss is a flying enemy, but fortunately 2/3 of my party can hit at range. And while Cloud can't normally, he does have the enemy skill materia and can deal even better damage with Flamethrower. Like Reno, this boss likes to encase people in bubbles, but just like Reno, they are very easy to break. And this boss doesn't really have that much HP. I don't even have to heal very much. With that boss down, it's time to dolphin jump up to Upper Junon. And thank you to the commenter that pointed out that you can always succeed at this by jumping anywhere, and the game will put you back down in the correct spot to jump. That saved me a lot of time. Then Cloud joins a parade and does badly. After that, I can swing by the shops. I don't have enough gil to purchase very much of note other than healing items. However, I can pick up my second enemy skill in the basement here. I won't have any enemy skills on it for a good bit, but good to pick it up in advance. Succeeding at this mini-game then gets me a Force Stealer, a nice new weapon for Cloud. Time to stow away on this boat, and my lovely sailing adventure is interrupted by the boat being attacked by strange creatures. Which means it's time for another boss fight, this time against Jenova. First note is that Jenova's laser attacks are really damaging. Good thing I have been slowly acquiring more high potions, because this damage is real rough. Regular attacks themselves also don't deal that much damage, and while Flamethrower is better, it's not exceptional. Limit breaks, though, are great. I am curious why limit breaks are both very available and deal very good damage. Yuffie does get afflicted with Stop, which I can't cure, but it's right at the end of the fight, so it doesn't really make any difference. And that brings me to Costa del Sol and the Second Continent. And my next destination is Corel, which means running along these train tracks, falling to pick up items, and then climbing back up. Nothing really exciting here, and I'm into Corel. I will need to do a bit of grinding here because I want to buy new carbon bangles for the whole party, and then I'll need to afford the trip to Gold Saucer. And then the game freezes in the transition between combat and the world map. And me being an idiot hasn't saved in a while, so let's redo that whole last section. Good thing nothing actually interesting happened. Okay, this time to actually ride up to Gold Saucer. Here I can recruit Kate Sith, who I will not be using, but who does come equipped with the Manipulate materia, which will be incredibly useful for learning enemy skills later. Then someone has done some murders, and I get blamed for it. So it's time to hunt down Barrett's old friend Dine, who Barrett must fight solo, which goes pretty easily actually, because I normally haven't leveled Barrett at all, but I've actually been using him this entire playthrough. I basically just spam attacks and limit breaks and heal a couple times. This means I have the chance to earn my freedom via Chocobo Race, which is an interesting system of justice, which I completely bypass by using the stamina cheat and win easily. And as an apology for being falsely accused, I now have the buggy, which means it's already time to do some backtracking. First is to the coast here, where I can manipulate these squid things to teach me Big Guard, which is always great. Then to fight this weird harpy monster so I can learn Aqualung, which is basically just as good as Beta, but water elemental. Then take the cargo ship back across the sea to access the area around Fort Condor. Here I can learn White Wind from the Zamzealot, which is very strong as always, healing the entire party based on the HP of the caster. And back over to the marshes, where I can actually survive Beta and learn that on both my enemy skill materia. Sadly, I did miss the laser skill in the Desert Prison, which is a shame because a nice Demi 2 can be very useful in some situations. And it's over to Gungaga to fight the Turks again. I have Big Guard and Beta, so this fight is comically fast. Was I supposed to steal something from them in this fight? Well, I sure didn't. I also pick up the Death Blow materia here that I use on occasion, but honestly it's not that useful. Buggy is broken down, so it's time to hop into Cosmo Canyon to do Cosmo Canyon stuff. This place is all new weapons and armor that I can't afford, and HP Plus materia that I also can't afford, and time to explore the Cosmo Canyon caves to deal with Red's daddy issues. Here I pick up the added effect materia, which can allow me to inflict some statuses via weapon attacks. I don't think I ever actually use this, because status effects are garbage in this game. Guess we'll have to see. And then the boss, which I can kill with a single X potion. Love an easy boss. Next up is Nibelheim, and the mansion exploration. And that means opening the safe by Googling the combination, and fighting my next boss, who is pretty strong for this point in the game, able to devastate my party in just a few hits. White Wind helps, because it heals the whole party, but it is a bit limited by having a high MP cost and being limited to the caster's HP. Fortunately, the boss dealing big damage also means that I get limit breaks pretty frequently. And Big Guard in Phase 2 can help reduce damage while I unleash Beta to chunk away huge amounts of health. So, not too bad. It is weird that enemy skills are so much stronger than the magic you'd have at this point. That done, it's time for Mount Nibel, which means it's another boss fight. First up is Big Guard to reduce damage, which is absolutely required. Oof, that was a chunky hit. And this boss absorbs fire damage, so I will need to rely on the slightly inferior Aqualung. And White Wind's high MP cost is definitely a problem. I do have some ethers, but not a ton. And why can this thing heal itself? Oh, right, this thing also gives Trine, which is cheaper than Beta and Aqualung, but also deals a decent bit less damage. And it's not ideal, but my biggest boon in this fight is absolutely just spamming limit breaks. I really feel like these should be harder to get or deal less damage, because it seems like they are just a bit too strong, which I am fine with. This gives me the counterattack materia. I equip this to hopefully get as many counterattacks as possible. Over to Rocket Town, which has new equipment, which in a sad continuation of how things have been going, I can't afford. I feel like money is way too tight in this game. Anyway, chat with Sid, then chat with Shira, then it's time for the next boss fight, Palmer. Big Guard first to reduce the damage I take, then it's time to spam Beta a bit to deal big damage, which has a big MP cost. Fortunately, Palmer does not have a large HP pool, and that ends the fight. Wait, how are we flying this plane? That's not how planes work. And now that I have the tiny Bronco, it's time to head over to Wutai. Not to do the side quest there, I'll do that later. Rather, by fighting enemies in the dead ground here, they drop just so many healing items. I assume so that you have healing for when you don't have any materia for the side quest, but for me, not having great healing options, enemies dropping Phoenix Downs and X potions really consistently is a huge boon. I don't want to get too overleveled or prepared, so done with that, and it's time to hop back over to the Gold Saucer to grab the Keystone. This requires Cloud to enter the battle arena, but he doesn't actually have to do well at all, so I don't. Then Kate Sith betrays the party, gets the keystone to the Turks, but all that means is my next destination is set at the Temple of the Ancients. Oh, the long-range materia is in the Mithril Cave? I knew that. I left it there for strategic reasons. Certainly not incompetence. Okay, time to dive into the temple. And if this turns into the same disaster as Magic Only did, I'm gonna be real unhappy. I do pick up a Luck Plus materia that is nebulously helpful, then a Morph materia, which I will just not be using at any point. And the Clock Room nets me some weapons, and most importantly, my first ribbon. And then it's next boss time. Start the fight with Big Guard as always, and Cloud goes down in 2 hits, so that's not great. Fortunately, this boss does only have about 7,000 HP, and Aqualung can deal big damage. Less good is that it can basically 2-shot anyone in my party. But between limit breaks and enemy skills, this fight ends pretty quickly. And it's already next boss time, Demon Wall. This fight was an unmitigated disaster in Magic Only. Let's see if no magic does better. It does, it so does. Don't get me wrong, the boss still deals big damage with its attacks, even when Protect is up, but my damage isn't awful, or MP restricted. I do have to refresh Big Guard throughout the fight, because I will not survive any amount of time without Protect up, but my basic attacks are dealing about 300, and limit breaks are dealing well over 1,000. Aerith basically doesn't attack, because I need someone focused on healing, and her attacks don't deal real damage anyway. Between Big Guard and White Wind, I can pretty effectively mitigate damage to my party, plus or minus a few ethers, to restock my MP. Because these enemy skills are absolutely not cheap. But thankfully, I don't have to spend hours leveling on triple speed, and I count that a win. Sephiroth has the black materia, Aerith is gone from the party forever, and it's time to head north. But actually, first, I think I'm gonna want to do the Wutai side quest. I have all the no materia slot weapons for big hits, and I still want to do this quest for some of the rewards. The side quest is basically nothing, with very little to talk about, and then it's time for the boss, which almost immediately takes out Cloud with an attack and Arrow 3. I wish that was an enemy skill in this game. And then Barret goes down. Good thing I have all these Phoenix Downs and X potions, and bombs. So that was interesting, but not too difficult. And thanks to the money I have acquired, I can finally buy some HP Plus materia to boost my HP. I'm gonna want to keep an HP Plus on the entire party the rest of the game. Okay, now it's time to hop back up to the northern continent to actually advance the main story. And that means running through this forest with the Lunar Harp I picked up hours ago. This gets me to the Forgotten Capital, which has my 3rd enemy skill. Now my entire party has an enemy skill materia. I could leave to grab some enemy skills now, but I think I'll just wait and do it later. Instead, it's time to dive below the capital for the next boss fight. Genova Life, I think? I don't remember. In my last video, I just made it into a Fast and a Furious joke instead of looking it up. But I honestly don't really feel like doing that this time. Yuffie has a water ring equipped, so she ignores all of Genova's attacks in this fight, which means victory is delayed, but inevitable. But no time to grieve, we gotta chase after Sephiroth. And climbing up this wall gets to the snowy north and a quick run over to the Icicle Inn, which is another place with a bunch of new weapons that I can't afford, and can't be bothered to grind for money to purchase anyway. I really need to get one of these all materia mastered. Time for snowboarding, which is just like surfing, but on snow. Weird, I know. And it also sucks. A part of me misses the mini-games in these PS1 era Final Fantasies. Then I play them and realize, no, I am wrong in fact. It was correct that these mini-games are now dead. This drops me down to the confusing mess that is the snowy area. Here I pick up Added Cut, which lets you do a basic attack when you use the attached materia. It doesn't actually combine helpfully in most cases, but I can combine it with Steel to get a discount mug command. But I arrive at this quaint little cabin, and it's time to continue my ascent up the mountain. And in the Gaia Cliffs, I can pick up my 2nd ribbon, which I missed on my prior playthrough. So more status resistances, which is always great. And it's time for the next boss fight. This 2-headed dragon, I want to say. First up is Big Guard as always. Then I start casting Aqualung, a damaging attack that neither head resists. The boss has some fairly strong attacks with its elemental breaths and earth magic, but most of my party is set up to absorb fire and or ice, which means half the time it attacks, it also heals me. Doesn't stop most of my party from going down due to overconfidence, which does get a bit spicy. The combination of Phoenix Downs and X potions is more than sufficient to get my party back up and attacking. White Wind is good, but with how much MP it costs, I can't wait to get W item. Wish it was sooner in the game. And with that boss beaten, it's time to grab some more enemy skills before I leave the area. First on the list is Magic Breath, which is a combo Aqualung, Beta, and Trine, and is expensive to match. Next is Bad Breath, which can cause a wide variety of status effects. Probably shouldn't have bothered, actually. Status effects are worthless in this game. Onward into the crater. Here, Tifa insists on joining the party, so I replace Yuffie and get Tifa set up. I will say I do a better job of getting through these bad weather barriers, but what's this? It's time for Jenova! Endgame? Sure, that works. Much like prior Jenova, this boss can only deal one type of damage, fire, which means Cloud absorbs all its attacks and Tifa takes no damage. I do cast Magic Breath briefly and then just switch to basic attacks because there isn't really any point in trying here. For a world-ending calamity, Jenova sure is easy to beat up. Also, not sure if it's the speed up or just getting out of a fight, but this screen basically always glitches with the visuals. Was that in the original? Or is this an emulation problem? I guess it doesn't really matter. Cloud gives Sephiroth the black materia, weapons awake, and it's back to Junon for the end of the world. And it's time to make our escape. I do have to use Kate Sith for a bit, which is always a disappointment, but fortunately I also get Barret, who is well trained up. Then Yuffie rejoins the team, though there aren't really any bosses or meaningful fights here, so it doesn't really make a difference. A convenient attack by weapon opens a hole in this very normal room, and Tifa can make her escape, get saved by the team in the Highwind, and I finally have air travel. Tifa then gets to take the lead for an entire 10 minutes before I arrive in Mideel. Can't afford any of the new weapons, and Tifa leaves to take care of Cloud. Which means Sid gets to be leader, for some reason. And first on the agenda is getting a few enemy skills and my third enemy skill materia now that I can fly. I won't bother with all of them, but White Wind and Big Guard are both very good. Magic Breath is strong enough offensively, so I don't really need any other skills. Time to grab the huge materia from the Corel reactor. Oh no, a train escape. And another train. And some mandatory fights on the back of a train. All of which end very quickly. Magic Breath may be MP expensive, but it does deal a ton of damage. Oh, and I guess I did use Bad Breath once. Neat. Anyway, the fights are over. And I can stop the train in time to save Corel. Which just gives me Ultima, so I might as well not have even bothered. Then to Fort Condor. I don't have a ton of money, but I definitely have enough to hire soldiers in the very cheap way I do, to only have to fend off a handful of the enemy. And that's already 2 huge materia down. Time to check on Cloud. And things go great. First is a fight with Ultima Weapon, whose name is wildly inaccurate. Big Guard drops the damage it can do by a lot, and then Magic Breath spam can reduce it to low health, so it runs away before I even have to use any ethers. And with how expensive Magic Breath is, that means you know it's fast. Time to sort through Cloud's fragmented mental state, but there are no fights here, so none of this matters to me. But it does mean the party is back together, and Cloud is back in the lead. But there's still 2 more huge materia to grab. First is the huge materia in the underwater reactor, which starts with an elevator fight, then a hallway fight, then another elevator ride, and it's time for the next boss, Grabby Hands. And this fight went bad on my magic only run. And it goes pretty badly immediately here too, with it picking up Barret immediately, then Yuffie, then Barret dies and it picks up Cloud, ending the fight. Wow, I have never been so thoroughly walloped in my life. That just went so badly, so immediately. Alright then, let's give this another try. This time I get off a Big Guard and start spamming Magic Breath, and it literally never uses arm grab. Not even once. Which, like, I know its arms died pretty quick, but still. And I still almost lose after a laser attack takes out both Cloud and Yuffie. It doesn't last, because Phoenix Downs, X Potions, and White Wind, but still, why is Grabby Hands the hardest boss in this game? That's just stupid. Whatever, with that weirdness out of the way, I can proceed onto the submarine and start the submarine minigame. But this time I remember to turn off 3x speed before the chase begins, so the enemy sub doesn't zoom away while I'm remembering controls, which makes this minigame very easy. That's a sub sank and submarine transport acquired, and now that I have the submarine, I can do a bit of a side quest. The Sunken Galnica has a bunch of stuff I very much want. First is the double cut materia, which is just attack twice, then a Turks fight, But here I can steal the Tough Ring, which I won't use, and the Zedric, the best armor in the game. It does come at the cost of no materia slots, but those defenses are chunky. I can also pick up the Hades materia. Can't use it in battle, but pairing it with added effect on armor functions as a ribbon, blocking all status effects. And of course Yuffie's ultimate weapon. Next thing on my agenda is to do some chocobo breeding. But that is expensive, and I am poor, so I'm gonna do some grinding outside Medeal to get some all materia finally mastered, because each one sells for over 1 million gil. And I'm basically going to skip all of it, because it took 2.5 hours, most of which at triple speed, and I had to do a bit of learning on how to manipulate the chocobo breeding RNG, because it's not well designed. I mostly did this to win high-level races and get GP, which I will need for something a bit later on, that also turns out to be a waste of time. Better types of chocobo do allow me to reach materia caves around the world. Unfortunately, basically all of them are worthless to me, except the green chocobo cave, which gives me the mime materia, which I barely use. And no, I'm not going to show you when I got mime, because I don't remember and there's 2.5 hours of footage. Suffice to say, this happened. It will not be in any way relevant to the rest of the challenge. We are moving on. Chocobo breeding completed, I can now access this forest. This requires a green chocobo, or you can wait until Ultima Weapon can be fought later on. Since I went through the effort, I may as well explore it now. Which is just a bunch of frog and fly puzzles that are fine, I guess. Item 1 on the docket is Slash All, which lets one character attack all enemies with their attack command, which can be useful in some circumstances, especially in this game where a lot of bosses have multiple target areas. And the final item is the Apocalypse Sword, which is way stronger than the weapon I had previously, and sports triple materia growth on its 3 slots. Back to actual plot, and it's time to head over to Rocket Town to be launched into space. But first is another fight against Rude. I can steal another of the best armor in the game before mercilessly beating him up. Sorry, Turks. You are aggressively not threatening to me. Going into space goes off mostly without a hitch, although the passcode to open the huge materia takes longer than it should have, because the internet is full of lies about what the code is. Then right back to Earth, and that's all 4 materia down. So time to take those back to Cosmo Canyon to drop them off with Bugenhagen. Brief submarine trip to grab the ancient key in advance, and it's back to the Forgotten Capital to watch a cutscene of Aerith dying. Again. And now it's time for Diamond Weapon to briefly be a threat. So I wait on the beach for it. And wait. And wait. This is at 3x speed, by the way. First up is to steal a nice shuriken from Weapon. It is immune to physical attacks in phase 1, so I just spam magic breath, and then it dies. Seriously, I thought it would at some point switch to being vulnerable to physical attacks, and I could wallop it with my cool new weapons and materia. But nope, just died. The path to the final dungeon is open, but alas, I must first deal with some nonsense in Midgar. But that's main story stuff. Instead, I'm gonna do some more side quests. First up is back in Wutai, where Yuffie can climb the pagoda by beating up these strong enemies. And at first, it seems interesting, with this first fight being reasonably challenging. And then the rest of the fights fold like wet tissue paper in a few hits. Not really sure why that first fight took effort, but all the remaining fights, including Yuffie's father, were complete pushovers. But I guess I'm not complaining. This gives me Yuffie's ultimate weapon, which I will never unlock. Spoiler, I guess. Next up, it's time to fight Ultima Weapon. This will give me Cloud's ultimate weapon. And just as important, when it dies, it will cast Shadow Flare, a strong single-target enemy skill. So I equip all my enemy skill materia on Cloud to make sure they can all learn it, dive into the fight, and it quickly runs. This fight is basically the follow-up to FF6's Death Gaze, but a bit more annoying. Rather than just reappearing in a random location, you have to find it in the sky, run into it, and then it will start darting towards one of a handful of preset locations. This fight isn't really difficult, so I just dive into the fight a few times. It then hangs out over Midgar, and I did not mean to initiate the Midgar raid section, game, but I don't get an option to say no, and reloading won't actually help, because that is where Ultima Weapon is. So I guess I'm not doing Ultima Weapon right now. It's time to advance the story. And that means climbing down some ladders and into the train tunnels. Here I can pick up my next big command materia, W item, which will let me use 2 items in 1 turn. Which, honestly, is not going to be a huge deal in the rest of this playthrough, but now it's another Turk fight. First up is to steal from all of them, because each Turk has some very nice stealable items, and then from there it's basically just spam attacks. Why are attacks so much stronger now? It's like they spent most of the game dealing no damage and now just deal as much or more damage than spells. Very weird. Another boss, the Proud Claude, Yuffie can hit both targets automatically with Slash All, and Cloud can deal big damage with 2x Cut. While I do cast Big Guard halfway through the fight before the big laser attack, the big laser only deals like 500 damage, so I might as well not have bothered. What is happening with this game's balance? Anyway, grab Barrett's ultimate weapon from this chest and into the next boss fight, Hojo, which is nothing. This fight is nothing. Hojo can cause a decent number of status effects, but my entire party is immune to all of them. And while I do use Magic Breath to expedite the fight, there isn't really anything the boss can do to even threaten me. I don't think I even healed. Not once. Alright, well that's the final boss before the Northern Crater, which I'll get to. But first, I have some unfinished business. First of which is Ultima Weapon. You don't get to escape me that easy, you dumb, weird centaur thing. Why is Ultima Weapon a centaur? Anyway, the boss dies and teaches all my enemy skills, Shadow Flare. But I still have some final errands I want to do before I proceed to the Northern Crater. And next on my list is the Battle Square. I have well over 3,000 points to pay for fights thanks to the chocobo racing I skipped. And Cloud, buffed up with Ultima Weapon and Zedric, can deal a lot of damage very quickly. While the random slots don't always work in my favor, they do enough to get me the points I want in only a handful of runs through the arena. This lets me buy the Omni/Limit Break for Cloud. I can't actually learn it yet, since I haven't finished learning Finishing Touch, but I will solve that issue shortly. Kind of. I'll get to it. And then one final pass over my equipment and materia to make sure everyone is appropriately kitted out. And over to Rocket Town to buy a bunch of healing items I will not actually be using. And now it's into the Northern Crater. This area doesn't have any bosses prior to Sephiroth at the end, but there are some enemies here that I want to encounter. First up is a Dark Dragon, which can teach my party Dragon Force to up defenses, and Laser to halve HP. Both can be pretty useful, so time to learn those. Actually, Laser dealing so much damage could be a great way to get my limit gauges up to unlock my final limit breaks. When it actually hits. And there it is, Finishing Touch, which means I can teach Cloud Omni-Slash. I finally have the strongest limit break, briefly, because then the game decides to softlock me on this ledge. That message? That should not be there at all. And I can't actually jump down or up. I don't know what happened here. I tried opening and closing the menu, getting into fights, changing configurations, and nope. I'm just stuck and I have to restart this run at the beginning. So I am going to learn Dragon Force again, and Laser for later, but I'm not grinding limits up. Everything in this dungeon is so weak, I don't think I'm even gonna need them. So back down and past this screen as quickly as possible, and it's time for the party split. And I mess it up again. And I realize it's because every character in the game says which way they are going, but Cloud gets asked by Sid. So in my not really reading anything way, I'm thinking Sid is going first. So now I get to head all the way back out of the crater, re-equip everything on Yuffie and Barrett, and head back down to do it correctly this time. And I take the right path. First up is this weird spider monster that casts a Pandora's box on death the first time. This enemy skill is basically Ultima, but a little cheaper. Then a fight against this woman, who can teach my entire party Angel Whisper, which is full life mixed with Kiraga. I will never use it. And here we go, the final sequence of fights. Will this be as big a mess as Magic Only, or is this going to be a complete joke? First up is some fights against big spider monsters and iron giants. Lasers take out half their HP very quickly, and I make it to the first actual boss here. Final Genova. I lead with a few Pandora's boxes to break her arm segments, and then need to delay, excuse me? What is happening with all of your body? There are, I suspect, 3 different Genovas layered on top of each other? What is happening with this game? For clarity, this is not a ROM or a bootleg copy of this game playing on an emulator. This is the official Switch release of this game, and I have never had this many weird issues. Anyway, I hang out in this fight a bit to make sure I get the easiest version of Sephiroth so I don't have to deal with multiple parties, and into the Bizarro Sephiroth fight. I again lead with Pandora's Box to break the secondary segments and... okay, it happened again. Is this a known issue with Pandora's Box? Because there are several Bizarro Sephiroths right now. I have never seen this before. Anyway, I basically just count on Yuffie to slash all to kill the core, and Cloud to 2x cut to take down the main body. And it's already into safe for Sephiroth. Big Guard helps with my defenses. I mean, I guess? And while I try out Shadow Flare, regular attacks or 2x cuts deal way more damage. Seriously, why is this game balanced so weirdly? Attacks started being weaker than everything else, and now are just stronger than everything else. I get hit with Supernova and use White Wind, which is not what I meant to do, since everyone's HP is very low, so Yuffie does go down. Good thing I have 99 Phoenix Downs and 11 Mega Elixirs. Honestly, I just shouldn't have bothered with enemy skill in this fight at all. It caused weird visual bugs and wasn't actually that useful. And one actual Omni Slash against Dream Sephiroth, and that is the game. Final Fantasy VII beaten without using magic, and that run was something? I don't even know how I feel about it. It was definitely interesting, and needing to rely on items and really lean on enemy skills was a neat change of pace, and I don't think I ever really appreciate how overpowered limit breaks were in this game. But then the endgame balance kind of became a mess, but in my favor, which is better than usual. But I will have more to say about that in the summary video out in a few weeks. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone and will remain that way. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.